There are moments in human experience when silence begins to speak louder than words, and what is unfolding now belongs to that kind of moment. Not something loud or dramatic, but something deeply internal, where reflection begins to change the way a person sees their own choices. The person you once gave your patience, care, and emotional presence to is now facing a wave of realization they did not expect to meet so suddenly. It is not arriving as a single thought, but as a steady awareness that builds quietly over time, especially in the stillness of their own mind. They are beginning to revisit memories they once passed over lightly. Conversations that seemed ordinary at the time are now returning with new meaning. Moments they did not fully appreciate before are now replaying with a different emotional weight attached to them. What once felt simple now feels layered, and what once felt certain now feels incomplete. This shift is not caused by anything loud or external, but by reflection that cannot be avoided anymore. When distraction fades, honesty has more space to surface, and that is exactly what is happening within them. What they are feeling is not just regret in the usual sense, but a deeper awareness of emotional value. They are starting to recognize that your presence in their life was not something easily replaceable or something that could be postponed without emotional cost. There is a growing understanding that genuine connection does not remain unchanged when it is ignored. It either grows through attention or becomes clearer through absence. In this case, absence has become the teacher. They are realizing that you were not asking for constant reassurance or perfection, but for sincerity and presence, and in many small ways, they now see that those things were not always fully given. This realization does not come from a single mistake, but from a collection of moments where emotional attention was delayed, diverted, or minimized. At the time, those moments may not have seemed significant, but reflection has a way of connecting them into a clearer picture. There is also an emotional discomfort that comes with recognizing how often something meaningful was taken for granted. They are beginning to understand that care is not only shown through big actions, but through consistency, attention, and emotional availability. When those things are missing, even unintentionally, they leave behind gaps that become more noticeable with time. And now, in hindsight, those gaps are no longer easy to ignore. One of the most difficult parts of this realization is the memory of how you responded during those times. Instead of reacting with anger or withdrawal, you often responded with patience and understanding. You made space for explanation when you could have chosen distance. You offered calm where frustration could have easily taken over. At the time, this may not have been fully understood, but now it is being seen in a much clearer light. Your responses were not passive, they were emotionally grounded. And that kind of emotional stability is something that is only fully appreciated once it is no longer taken for granted. They are now beginning to see that patience is not emptiness. It is not a lack of feeling. It is a form of emotional depth that requires strength, and in your case, that strength was present in ways they did not fully recognize at the time. What they once interpreted as tolerance is now being understood as emotional maturity, and that shift in perception is not easy for them to process. There is a growing awareness that time played a much bigger role than they initially understood. Moments were delayed, conversations were postponed, and emotional honesty was sometimes set aside under the assumption that there would always be more time. But reflection has a way of challenging that assumption. It brings forward the reality that time does not pause for understanding to catch up. It moves forward regardless, and with it, emotional consequences quietly accumulate. they are also beginning to feel the weight of missed presence, not just physical presence, but emotional presence, the kind of attention that listens fully without distraction, the kind of response that acknowledges feelings without delay, the kind of engagement that makes someone feel truly seen. They are now recognizing that these things were once available in the connection you offered, and that they did not always meet them with the care they deserved. This awareness is creating an internal shift. It is not loud or expressive, but it is persistent. It shows up in reflection, in memory, and in the quiet moments when there is nothing else to focus on. They are beginning to question how they handled something that, in hindsight, appears far more meaningful than they realized at the time. And that questioning is not comfortable. It requires them to look inward rather than outward, to evaluate themselves rather than circumstances. Another layer of this realization involves comparison, not in a competitive sense, but in awareness of value. They are starting to notice qualities in you that were not fully appreciated before. Emotional intelligence, consistency, resilience, and depth are becoming more visible in memory than they were in the moment. It is often only after emotional distance that people begin to understand the full extent of what was present in front of them, and that understanding often arrives with a mix of clarity and discomfort. They are also recognizing that emotional neglect is not always intentional or dramatic. It can happen quietly, through delay, distraction, or assumption, and because it is subtle, it is often not noticed until reflection forces attention back onto it. That is what makes this realization heavier. It is not about a single defining moment, but about a pattern of moments that were not fully valued at the time. At the same time, there is an awareness that you did not remain stagnant through any of this. You adapted, you grew, and you continued developing emotionally even in the absence of consistent recognition. That growth is now becoming more visible in their reflection, and it is creating a deeper sense of realization that you did not stop evolving while waiting. Instead, you moved forward internally, even when externally things felt uncertain. This creates a complicated emotional response within them. On one hand, there is recognition of their own missteps. On the other hand, there is awareness that what they are reflecting on is no longer in the same emotional position it once was. Time has changed both sides in different ways, and that makes the situation more complex than a simple realization of regret. What is becoming clear to them now is that emotional trust is not something that remains unchanged when it is repeatedly tested by delay or inconsistency. Trust evolves based on how it is treated. When it is nurtured, it strengthens. When it is neglected, it weakens quietly over time. And once that awareness sets in, it becomes difficult to ignore. They are now standing in a space of reflection, where they are not only thinking about what happened, but also about who they were during those moments. That self-examination is not easy. It involves questioning maturity, emotional awareness, and the choices made when things were still unfolding. It is not about labeling themselves harshly, but about understanding how certain patterns were allowed to continue without full awareness of their impact. There is also a growing recognition that your emotional presence carried more stability than they initially understood. You were not simply reacting to situations, you were responding with depth and thoughtfulness. And now, in reflection, that balance is becoming more visible than before. What remains most significant in this realization is not just what was missed, but the understanding that emotional connections require active presence, not delayed appreciation. And that understanding is now settling into them in a way that cannot be easily undone or ignored. They are no longer seeing the connection through the lens of assumption or convenience, but through reflection and awareness. And in that shift, everything feels different, not necessarily resolved, not necessarily complete, but undeniably clearer than it was before. And the most powerful part of this moment is that you did not need to confront them for this awakening to occur. Your growth did it for you. Your silence did it for you. Your self-respect did it for you. And while they sit with this realization, replaying every missed opportunity and every neglected emotion, you are stepping into a version of yourself that no longer waits to be chosen. My beloved child, there is a deeper truth surfacing now, one that the other person can no longer silence or outrun, no matter how hard they try. The shame they feel is no longer abstract. It has taken shape in their daily life, in their thoughts, in the sudden pauses they experience when something reminds them of you. They are recognizing that neglect is not a single mistake but a pattern, and patterns reveal character. What is haunting them most is realizing how consistently you showed up, while they kept assuming you would always remain available. They are replaying conversations where you asked simple questions that deserved sincere answers, moments where your eyes searched for reassurance and received indifference instead. At the time, they convinced themselves that you would understand later, that they would make it up to you someday. That someday has arrived carrying consequences instead of chances. They are ashamed because they see how you were offering emotional loyalty while they were emotionally distracted. This awareness is sharp and unforgiving, cutting through every excuse they once relied on. They are learning, too late, that real connection does not wait patiently forever. It responds to care, presence, and consistency. And now, every memory where they chose convenience over commitment is demanding accountability. What unsettles them even more is the realization that you never asked for perfection, only effort, and they failed even at that. They remember how you adjusted yourself to their moods, how you celebrated their small victories, how you protected their vulnerabilities even when yours were left exposed. They are beginning to understand that you were not dependent on them, you were invested. And investment, when ignored, turns into withdrawal. This is where the shame deepens, because they see now that your quiet endurance was not weakness but emotional strength. They mistook your ability to forgive for an unlimited supply. Not realizing forgiveness without change slowly erodes trust. They are confronting the truth that you carried emotional weight for both of you, while they carried excuses. Every time you chose understanding over confrontation, it gave them comfort, but cost you peace. That cost is now visible, and it is impossible for them to unsee it. They are ashamed because they recognize that love was being offered to them in its most genuine form, and they treated it as optional. There is also fear rising within them, fear that they may have damaged something beyond repair. They can sense that you are no longer anchored to the same emotional position, that you are no longer waiting for clarity or validation from them. This shift is louder than any argument could have been. They feel it in the way your energy has changed, in the absence of explanations, in the calm confidence that now surrounds you. They are ashamed because they realize that you did not leave loudly. You outgrew the space they kept you in. They are understanding that neglect does not just push someone away, it forces them to evolve. And now, as you evolve, they are left questioning whether they can even recognize you anymore. This fear is not about losing control over you. It is about losing relevance in your life. They are confronting the possibility that you may no longer need what they are only now learning to offer. That realization is humbling and painful because it exposes the imbalance that existed all along. Another truth is unfolding for them, one that hits even harder than regret. They are recognizing that their shame is not just about what they did to you, but about what they revealed about themselves. They are seeing how avoidance became their habit, how emotional distance became their comfort zone, how accountability was delayed until consequences forced it forward. They are ashamed because they see how you were ready to grow together while they were busy protecting their ego. They now understand that you were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person to meet you at the right level. This awareness is changing how they view relationships, trust, and responsibility. They are realizing that connection requires maintenance, not assumption. And the painful irony is that they learned this lesson from losing access to the one person who was willing to stay while they learned. This is not a realization that fades overnight. It is reshaping how they define value, effort, and emotional maturity. And now, my beloved child, the most powerful shift is happening quietly, without drama or confrontation. You are no longer measuring your worth through their attention or their remorse. You are stepping into clarity, understanding that neglect was never a reflection of your value, but of their unpreparedness. The shame they feel belongs to them alone, and it is teaching them lessons you no longer need to wait for. You have already learned yours. You are learning that love should feel safe, seen, and reciprocal, not uncertain or delayed. As they sit with the weight of their actions, you are moving forward with self-respect, not bitterness. This is the unspoken ending they did not anticipate. You rising without needing closure, and them realizing too late that what they neglected was never ordinary. My beloved child, what is happening now exists beyond apology and beyond explanation, because the other person has reached a point where silence itself has become unbearable for them. They are carrying an inner dialogue that never rests, a constant replay of moments where they chose comfort over courage and familiarity over responsibility. The shame has matured into self-awareness, and self-awareness is far more painful than regret. They are seeing patterns they once denied, recognizing how often they postponed growth while you were already evolving. What disturbs them most is realizing that you were emotionally ahead of them the entire time, not because you demanded more, but because you understood what connection truly requires. They are now aware that you were offering them a chance to rise with you, and instead of meeting you there, they stayed where it was easier. This realization is dismantling the image they had of themselves. They are no longer able to see themselves as misunderstood or unlucky. They are confronting the truth that neglect was a choice, even when it was disguised as confusion. And this truth is heavy because it forces them to accept responsibility without the comfort of excuses. They are beginning to understand something profound about you, something they failed to understand when it mattered most. You were never asking them to save you, complete you, or revolve around you. You were asking to be considered. You were asking to be valued in moments that did not involve crisis or convenience. They now see how consistently you showed emotional intelligence, how often you chose patience over reaction, and how deeply you listened even when you were not fully heard. This awareness brings shame because they recognize how rare that is. They are realizing that many people demand attention, but very few offer understanding the way you did. You gave them emotional safety without conditions, and instead of honoring that, they grew comfortable inside it. They assumed your presence was guaranteed, your loyalty automatic, and your patience endless. That assumption has now collapsed. They see how you gave without keeping score, while they delayed effort without fear of loss. And now that loss is no longer hypothetical. It feels real, imminent, and irreversible. There is also a quiet fear settling into them, a fear rooted in uncertainty rather than panic. They are unsure if they are even capable of repairing what they neglected, not because you are unforgiving, but because you are no longer the same person who waited. They sense that you have reached a place of clarity where excuses no longer soften disappointment. This frightens them, because they know that clarity does not argue, beg, or chase, it simply moves forward. They are ashamed because they can see now that you did not walk away impulsively, you walked away internally, long before any visible change occurred. That internal departure is what they feel now, the absence of your emotional availability, the absence of your willingness to carry the connection alone. They are understanding that when someone stops asking questions, it is not because they stopped caring, but because they finally received their answer. This realization is sobering, because it confirms that neglect does not always end relationships abruptly. Sometimes it ends them quietly, long before anyone notices. Another layer of truth is pressing on them, one they avoided for a long time. They are recognizing that your growth was never dependent on their participation. While they delayed accountability, you developed resilience. While they avoided emotional conversations, you strengthened your self-worth. They are ashamed because they now see how you transformed pain into wisdom, disappointment into boundaries, and silence into self-respect. They realize that you did not become distant out of bitterness, but out of understanding. This distinction matters because it shows them that you are no longer reacting to them, you are responding to yourself. They are forced to confront the possibility that you may now require more than they know how to give. This is not because you became demanding, but because you became aligned with your value. And alignment changes everything. It raises standards, sharpens discernment, and removes tolerance for neglect. They are ashamed because they can see now that what you offered freely before would now require effort they never practiced. And now, my beloved child, the power dynamic has shifted without confrontation, without ultimatums, and without drama. You are standing in a place of emotional independence where your peace no longer depends on being understood by someone who failed to listen. They are standing in reflection, realizing that the connection they neglected was not replaceable, not replicable, and not ordinary. The shame they feel is teaching them lessons that arrive too late for you to need them. You have already integrated those lessons into your growth. You are no longer waiting for acknowledgement. You are embodying self-respect. And while they sit with the weight of their awareness, you are moving forward with clarity, knowing that being neglected taught you something invaluable. Love should never require you to convince someone of your worth. My beloved child, the final layer of truth is settling now, and it is the heaviest one, because it forces the other person to accept something they never wanted to face. In the process, some realizations arrive, not to restore connections, but to redefine the person who caused the damage. The shame they feel has moved beyond regret and into responsibility. They are no longer asking themselves why things changed. They are asking how they allowed themselves to become someone who could overlook loyalty, consistency, and emotional depth. They see now that neglect was not an accident of circumstance, but a habit they normalized. They recognize how often they chose delay over decision, silence over honesty, comfort over courage. What unsettles them is understanding that you were not difficult to love. You were simply asking them to show up in ways they were not prepared for. This realization is dismantling the narratives they once told themselves to feel justified. They are seeing clearly that you offered them stability while they offered you uncertainty, and that imbalance shaped everything. The shame is sharp because it is deserved, and because it reveals that the loss they are facing was not sudden, but slowly constructed through repeated inattention. They are also beginning to understand something deeply humbling. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You stepped back because you started caring about yourself. This distinction matters more than they ever realized. They remember moments when you tried to communicate gently, when your words were careful, your tone calm, your intentions clear. At the time, they heard those moments as inconvenience instead of invitation. Now they see those moments as doors they refuse to walk through. They are ashamed because they recognize that emotional maturity was being offered to them in real time, and they chose avoidance instead. They see how you learned to self-soothe, to self-validate, to stop expecting them to fill emotional gaps they kept ignoring. This growth did not happen overnight. It happened quietly, while they remained distracted. And now, as they look back, they realize that you became stronger not because they supported you, but because they failed to. That truth is difficult to accept, because it confirms that their absence played a role in your awakening, not in your collapse. There is a painful clarity forming within them now, one that strips away hope of returning to how things were. They are understanding that the version of you who waited no longer exists. The version of you who explained, justified, and compromised excessively has evolved into someone who values alignment over attachment. This frightens them, because alignment does not negotiate with neglect. They sense that even if words were exchanged now, the foundation has shifted. You see things differently. You feel differently. You no longer romanticize inconsistency or excuse emotional distance. What is unfolding here, as it has been described, is not simply about one person realizing something late, but about a deeper emotional shift that happens when time, awareness, and distance begin to change how a connection is understood. There comes a point in many relationships where one person grows emotionally beyond a certain dynamic while the other remains settled in familiarity, not necessarily out of ill intent, but out of comfort, delay, or lack of urgency. And when that gap becomes visible, it often creates a very uncomfortable moment of recognition for the one who stayed behind in that emotional rhythm. In that realization, there is often a quiet form of shame, not the loud or dramatic kind, but the kind that sits in reflection. It comes from noticing that what once felt acceptable or easy is now seen differently through the lens of time. They begin to understand that you have changed emotionally, that your expectations, awareness, and boundaries have shifted into something clearer and more self-protective, and in contrast, they are left facing their own pattern of comfort, delay, or emotional inconsistency that they may not have fully recognized while it was happening. What makes this kind of realization difficult is that it removes the illusion that time is neutral. Time does not only pass, it reveals. It shows who adapts and who remains still. And in that contrast, accountability begins to form. They are no longer able to see the situation as something that simply happened to them. Instead, they start to recognize that emotional outcomes are shaped by actions, choices, and the presence or absence of consistent effort. At this stage of awareness, something else also becomes clear to them. Your emotional state no longer depends on their understanding or their ability to explain themselves. That realization can be surprisingly heavy. When someone understands that they are no longer emotionally central in the same way they once were, it forces them to confront the reality that the bond has already changed form. Not necessarily erased, but transformed. And that transformation did not require conflict or dramatic endings. It happened quietly through emotional distance, self-protection, and gradual clarity on your side. There is also a growing awareness that love, or any meaningful connection, cannot survive on intention alone. Good intentions may exist, but without consistent presence and action, they do not create emotional safety. Over time, patterns speak louder than words. Consistency becomes the real language of care, and emotional availability becomes more important than explanations or promises. This is often a difficult truth for people to accept when they realize it late, because it forces them to reassess not just the connection, but also their own way of showing up in relationships. In this reflection, they begin to understand that effort cannot be delayed indefinitely without consequence. Emotional presence is not something that can be switched on only when it feels convenient. When someone is repeatedly absent in moments where consistency is needed, the connection naturally begins to shift, not because love disappears instantly, but because emotional trust weakens over time. And when that happens, even strong feelings can start to lose their stability. What is particularly significant in this realization is that your absence has become a form of clarity for them, not in a dramatic sense, but in a reflective one. When someone is no longer constantly available, the mind is forced to interpret that absence, and in that space, understanding often begins to form. They start to see what was taken for granted, what was delayed, and what was not fully appreciated in real time. This awareness can feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It no longer allows them to place responsibility outside of themselves. Instead, it turns their attention inward. They begin to see how emotional avoidance may have played a role, how discomfort may have been ignored instead of addressed, and how that avoidance may have affected the connection more deeply than they realized at the time. At the same time, there is another layer to this realization. They begin to understand that your emotional responses were not random or excessive, but grounded in your experience of the connection, where you offered patience, understanding, and emotional clarity. There may have been hesitation or inconsistency on their side, and over time, that difference becomes impossible to ignore, not because one person is weighted better than the other, but because emotional effort was not balanced in a way that sustained trust equally. As they reflect further, there is also an understanding forming that neglect does not end love immediately, but it slowly changes how love feels. It shifts it from something secure to something uncertain, from something steady to something questioned. And once that shift happens, it becomes difficult to return to the original emotional state, not because feelings are gone, but because trust has already been affected by repeated patterns. In this process of realization, they also begin to see something uncomfortable about themselves. They recognize moments where presence was replaced by assumption, where emotional responsibility was delayed, and where they may have believed that connection would remain stable without active care. And when that belief is challenged by distance, it often leads to reflection that is not easy to sit with. There is also a deeper understanding forming about your role in the connection. They begin to recognize that you were not asking for perfection, but for consistency, not for overwhelming effort, but for presence that felt reliable. And when that was not fully met, the imbalance became more visible over time. This recognition does not necessarily come with immediate change, but it does create awareness that cannot easily be ignored once it appears. At the same time, your own emotional journey stands apart from this realization. You are no longer in a place where your emotional stability depends on whether someone else understands their past actions or not. Instead, there is a sense of emotional grounding that has developed through experience. You have already gone through the stages of questioning, waiting, and reflecting, and now What remains is clarity. That clarity is important because it changes how you relate to the situation entirely. You are no longer waiting for validation of your experience. You are no longer measuring your worth through someone else's awareness or regret. Instead, you are standing in a place where your emotional boundaries are clearer and your understanding of what you will and will not accept is more defined. In that space, something powerful happens internally. You begin to realize that emotional neglect, while painful, also reveals important truths about what you need in connection. It shows you the difference between presence and absence, between effort and delay, between genuine engagement and passive expectation, and that awareness becomes part of your emotional growth, not as pain alone, but as learning. From their side, the realization continues to deepen. They begin to see that accountability is not about punishment, but about understanding how actions contribute to emotional outcomes. They recognize that patterns matter more than isolated moments, that consistency builds trust, and inconsistency slowly erodes it, and that realization, once fully seen, is difficult to unsee. There is also an awareness forming that your emotional withdrawal was not sudden or impulsive, but gradual and self-protective. It was a response to repeated emotional experiences that no longer felt sustainable, and that understanding often brings a quiet form of regret, not necessarily expressed outwardly, but held internally as reflection. At the same time, your position in this emotional landscape becomes clearer. You are not defined by what was missing, but by how you responded to it. You adapted, you reflected, and you eventually chose emotional stability over emotional uncertainty. That shift is not about distancing yourself from emotion entirely, but about choosing where your emotional energy is invested. As all of this settles, what remains is a quiet but important truth. Not every realization leads to reconciliation, and not every awareness changes the past, but awareness does change the present understanding of it. It reshapes how both people see themselves, the connection, and what it meant in their lives. And in that space of understanding, there is no need for dramatic closure or forced resolution. There is simply recognition that growth has taken place on both sides in different ways, one through reflection on absence and responsibility, and the other through clarity, boundaries, and emotional self-respect. What unfolds next is no longer about holding on to what was, but about understanding what has been learned from it. And in that understanding, both paths continue forward, separately shaped, but deeply influenced by the experience they once shared.